A respected pair of Border Patrol agents vanished during a routine solo patrol in 1991. Their unit vehicle gone. Their last radio call cut short, and no trace ever found. But 13 years later, a surveillance chopper scanning flood-damaged borderlands catches something strange buried in the sand. A discovery that would pull a long-closed file back into the light and expose a chain of silence no one was prepared to face. The DHS chopper banked low over Sector D12, skimming the edge of a narrow wash scarred by recent monsoons. Pilot Tom Heron steadied his grip on the cyclic and leaned toward the canopy. "You seeing that?" he asked his co-pilot. Below, just beyond a collapsed drainage gully, something caught the sun, faint and dull, but unmistakably metallic. The ridge of a roof rack. A vehicle half buried in silt and brush sat at a crooked angle, its color indistinct under years of dirt. Tom circled once more. The side panel bore a ghosted emblem, U.S. Border Patrol, barely legible. The door code underneath had mostly flaked away, but what remained read 4207. He keyed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Airwatch 27. I've got visual on a buried unit off-grid line 38 near mile marker 81. Code on the door reads 207. Possible Sector 5 vehicle, requesting ground confirmation." By the time Dana Reic stepped out of the Tahoe, the perimeter was already cordoned off by orange tape and a scatter of DHS personnel in sun-bleached uniforms. Her boots sank slightly in the soft dirt as she crossed toward the excavation site, pausing near a crew crouched around the vehicles. Rear. The Chevy Suburban lay half swallowed by the earth, its front end tilted downward into the wash. A backhoe sat idle nearby. Two men with shovels worked the rear wheel wells. The tailgate still bore sticker remnants of a patrol unit, faded so badly the numbers had to be traced with a gloved finger to make them out. A field tech confirmed what dispatch had already relayed. Unit 4207 had been reported missing in June 1991. Superintendent Len Brewer stood off to the side, arms folded, brow shaded by his wide-brimmed campaign hat. He spotted Dana and gave a nod, more perfunctory than polite. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "They called me," Dana replied, eyes on the vehicle. "I didn't volunteer." Brewer's gaze dropped to the excavation. "Some rookie pilot thinks he found a fossil. Probably an old repo unit that got washed off the road back in the day. It was still active when it disappeared," she said flatly. Brewer didn't answer. The vehicle groaned as the rear doors were forced open. Years of sand and corrosion made the hinges brittle. When the latch gave way, dust billowed out like the room temperature breath of a tomb. Dana pulled her scarf higher over her mouth and stepped closer. Inside, the cargo liner had curled from heat and decay. Dark patches stained the plastic, dried, brown-red. A tech stepped in with a portable light. "This is blood," he said. After a moment, too degraded to tell how much from here, but it pooled. Might have been there a long time. Dana stepped back, letting the scene absorb her. No animal signs, no signs of struggle, just time and silence. While one team documented the exterior, another began cataloging what remained inside. Dana stood beside the front passenger door, arms crossed, as a tech gently pried open the glove. Box with a flat tool. Out came a sun-warped incident notebook, pages clumped and yellowed from humidity. The name on the cover was faded, but the faint blue ink on the first page read Prescott R. and Hartley L. dates trailed off around mid-June. The cracked stub of a pen was still wedged into the spiral binding. Next, The radio mic snapped at the base, cord frayed and coiled behind the center console. The final items pulled out were 2.4 OS and W Border Patroller chute sidearms. The serial numbers faint but intact. The magazines, when checked, were half empty. 3 rounds missing from each. The tech said. Dana said nothing. She squinted toward the driver's seat. Upholstery long since shredded. Dashboard warped under years of heat. The keys were still in the ignition. Brewer reappeared, hands on his hips. "This is going to stir up things that don't need stirring," he said, keeping his voice low. "You know how many agents we've had go off radar in that time frame? 12, maybe more. You try tying all of them to foul play, and we'll be buried in paperwork till retirement." Dana turned toward him. This wasn't a flood. The radio was broken. The guns were drawn. The blood was in the back. "You think they abandoned post and dumped their own truck?" Brewer exhaled sharply through his nose and looked away. "It's been 13 years, Dana. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. They'd brought the vehicle out in stages." Dana watched from the edge of the perimeter as they hooked cables through the rear axle, inching the Suburban up and onto a flatbed. The silence around the operation was thick. No chatter, no idle talk. A junior tech approached her. "You want the log entries tagged separately?" She nodded. "Yeah. Bag the whole book. Trace anything you can on the pen, too." He hesitated. "There's an ID number scratched into the back of the notebook. Not sure if it's a case file or a radio call. Could be something. Mark it and copy it. Everything goes to evidence in Laredo." As he left, Dana turned back toward the vehicle. One of the rear doors hung slightly ajar. She walked to it, braced a hand on the frame, and looked inside again. The air was dry, but held a staleness she couldn't name. "Let's get it bagged," she said finally. Dana stood at the counter, waiting as the clerk behind the glass flipped through a set of manila folders, clearly unimpressed with the urgency. On her request form, he looked to be in his late 20s, haircut fresh, badge clipped too high on his chest. The nameplate read M. Sweeney. "You said Border Patrol Unit 4207, he asked, frowning. "That's right, Rachel Prescott and Laura Hartley," Sweeney muttered, something under his breath, and turned around to a low cabinet. After a minute, he returned with a slim file and set it in the tray between them. "That's all we've got from 91. Most of it's on microfiche, but that pool's been in limbo since we moved storage to the new annex." Dana flipped it open. It was thinner than expected. 4 pages, maybe 5, not including the standard onboarding forms. They were fresh from Del Rio, Sweeney added. "Assigned to Sector J near Loma Alta, solo vehicle patrol, just a few weeks in before they disappeared. You have their patrol rotation." Sweeney shook his head. "That would be in the detail rosters. You'll need to request it through dispatch archives." He paused. "But fair warning, they usually push back on pre-2000 pulls. Says it jams the system." Dana sat at a back desk in the archive room with a worn printout of Sector J's radio log. From June 17, 1991, most of the calls were routine, check-ins, license checks. Weather pings. Prescott and Hartley's last confirmed call came at 1842. Unit 4207 reporting vehicle inspection at Culvert 73 south of Checkpoint Charlie. The voices had been transcribed manually. No audio remained. After that, silence. No return call, no backup request, just dead air. Dana scribbled the time and location on her notepad. She knew the area. Culvert 73 cut through a dry channel near the border fence, isolated, hard to see from the main road. Back then, it was notorious for smuggling heavier cargo, cash, weapons, people with names. Even now, only experienced agents patrolled it, and never alone. She flipped back to the vehicle. Roster, that day's road had them heading east. Standard sweep, but the log showed them veering 2 miles south around 1720. No explanation. Dana found Westbrook at a used tire shop. He ran out of a side lot in Roma. He was hunched over a wheel balancer, hands stained with grease and age. When she introduced herself and explained the case, he wiped his palms on a towel and leaned against the counter. "I remember Prescott and Hartley," he said. "Young, quiet, didn't drink, didn't gossip, got assigned out of sequence, but that happened a lot back then. Their route changed the day they disappeared. You remember why?" "No idea," Westbrook replied. "Assignments were manual. Sanders handled that week's dispatch." "Calvin Sanders?" Westbrook nodded. "Yeah, transferred out a few years later. Quiet guy, kept to himself." Dana pulled out a copy of the presumed resignation letter their families had received. "You signed this?" Westbrook squinted. "Doesn't look like my pen. Probably drafted by admin and pushed through. We didn't exactly make a show of missing persons back then." "What do you remember about the search?" "There wasn't one," he said flatly. "Not a proper one, anyway. They classified them as a WOL within 48 hours. Claimed they probably crossed over or ran, to where he shrugged. No one asked." Back at the station, Dana pulled the paper shift logs for that week. The forms were photocopies, lined in faded blue ink. The one from June 17th showed Prescott and Hartley clocked in at 14 o'clock hours. Dispatch noted them as patrolling Sector J. GRID reference 449 through 453. The log was signed off at the bottom. Supervisor C. Sanders. Dana made a mark beside his name. She kept reading. Prescott and Hartley had logged a single infield stop at 1635, routine tire check on a 90 Ford. Pickup. The plate number had been transcribed, but no citation issued. Then the final entry, 1842, Culvert 73. After that, the page went blank. She traced the sign-off signature, same hand on all pages, that week. Sanders again. The dispatch archive room was a windowless bunker 2 floors down, air thick with the smell of disused electronics and binder dust. A junior analyst named Terry Holcomb keyed in her badge and led. Dana passed rows of outdated reel-to-reel units stacked like museum pieces. "We've got most of the 90s backed up on reel," she said. But the summer of 91 had issues. Equipment failure. "What kind of failure?" Holcomb tapped a metal case labeled Q3-1991. This quarter's tapes were marked unreadable, heat damage. Compressor went out, and no one caught it until it fried a shelf of recordings. All of them, mostly Sector J and K. The rest were salvageable. Prescott and Hartley were in J. Holcomb gave a sympathetic look. "Yeah, I saw that on the pull request. Nothing came up." Dana stared at the cabinet for a long moment, then nodded. "Can I get the serial numbers of the compromised reels?" Holcomb opened a logbook and jotted down a sequence of alphanumeric tags. "Here you go." Back outside, Dana sat in her rental, window cracked just enough to let the heat bleed out. She laid the papers across the passenger seat. Prescott and Hartley's file. The log sheets, their final radio call, a missing tape, a rerouted patrol, a solo assignment near a known smuggling corridor. No search, a resignation letter sent to their families. None of it held together. If Prescott and Hartley had walked away, they hadn't planned it. And someone had made sure no one came looking. Do you believe it's just a coincidence that the archives containing Prescott and Hartley's last known patrol records were damaged by heat? Or is someone going to great lengths to bury the truth? Comment below. Can Dana uncover the full truth and bring justice to fellow agents lost in the line of duty? Or will evil win again? Tap that like button and stay with us, because what happens next changes everything. Also, let us know where you're tuning in from today. Dana stood at the administrative desk in the Laredo field office, signing the authorization form with a controlled hand. The case number had been dormant since 1991. She marked the final checkbox, reclassified. Suspicious circumstances. Once filed, it would trigger notifications to internal records, oversight, and chain of command, whether they wanted them or not. She dropped the form in the tray and stepped into Brewer's office without knocking. He was on the phone mid-sentence, but paused when he saw her. "I'll call you back," he muttered and hung up. "It's reopened," she said. Brewer leaned back in his chair. "Mean what?" "Prescott and Hartley's disappearance is now classified under suspicious circumstances. The report goes up tonight." Brewer tapped a capped pen on the desk, eyes fixed on hers. "You better know what you're kicking up." "I do," she said. "That's why I'm doing it." He didn't respond. The silence hung too long to be neutral. Dana was combing through the secondary witness folder when she spotted it. A single handwritten statement, misfiled behind a report on tire thefts from '92. The page was curled at the edges, written in tight block letters. "Saw Border Patrol, SUV, slow roll, west fence. 8:30 maybe. Looked like Prescott and Hartley's. RIG, another SUV behind it. Black, no plate. Sat there a while, not BP. Waited for the first one to pass, then followed. Signed, H. Galvin, Ranch 43. She checked the official interview log. The public report listed 0 credible civilian sightings. No mention of Hector Galvin at all. Hector Galvin lived alone now, out past the old Santa Vega line. His ranch house sat back from the road, weathered but orderly. He answered the door wearing a sweat-darkened hat and a flannel shirt buttoned to the top. "You're the first law to come out here about that in what, a decade," he said once she introduced herself. "I'm not here for the ranch. I'm here for what you saw." He invited her onto the porch, poured lukewarm water from a jug. They sat without ceremony. "I said what I saw back then. They told me it didn't fit." He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. "But I remember. Tell me again. I was checking. Fence line west of mile marker 41. It was just turning dark. Saw one of your trucks, green Suburban like they all were back then, roll by slow. I recognized the light bar. Border Patrol don't drive slow for nothing out here. And the other vehicle, blacked out Tahoe or Suburban. No plate, tinted windows, parked behind my irrigation trailer for 20 minutes at least. Didn't move until the BP rig passed by, headed south. Then it pulled out and followed." He looked at her, didn't feel right. "Did you report it?" "To the field office. Told a supervisor. I forget his name. Never heard back." "Was it Calvin Saunders?" "That's it. Quiet guy." Dana closed her notebook. "Thank you, Mr. Galvin." She returned to the evidence catalogue later that evening. requesting access to Prescott and Hartley's weapon files. The chain of custody ledger listed them as logged June 20th, 1991, under temporary retention. They were marked with basic inventory tags and placeholder serial fields, pending. No follow-up, no confirmation of match, no notation that the weapons had ever been test-fired or catalogued for ballistics. Just a final line in red ink. Destroyed. Standard clearance 1995. Dana checked the destruction log. The box number listed was missing from the archive manifest, in a basement storage drawer, sandwiched between backlog travel reimbursements and weather dispatch forms from 1992. Dana found it, an unsigned internal complaint sheet, faded and misaligned in a copier, dated June 4th, 1991, 2 weeks before Prescott and Hartley vanished. The complaint described a suspected unlawful detainment, en route near a defunct water tower 3 miles east of the assigned patrol zone. The writers stated they'd witnessed a group of individuals being held without formal processing. No record, no transport call, no backup logged. The details were sparse but specific. Time of day, approximate number of detainees, a physical description of one of the unmarked vehicles on scene. It ended with a single sentence. "We'll follow up in person if not addressed." Dana checked the name, field, blank. But the handwriting matched the notes in Prescott and Hartley's incident book, now drying in a field lab across town. The DHS operations wing was mostly empty by the time she made it up there. Dana flagged down a technician she'd worked with before, Leo Carnes, a forensic analyst who did quiet work fast. "You pulled the log tapes for me last week," she said. Carnes nodded. "Yeah, didn't find much. Not your fault," she said. "But something's missing." He glanced around, then leaned closer. When they disappeared, things shifted. Not just the logs. Their shift data got reassigned, archived differently. To vehicles that week had their maintenance history scrubbed. I was an intern then. Still remember it. It was quiet but intentional. "You ever say anything?" "I did once. Got reassigned. To inventory tracking for 3 years. Dana stepped back, nodded. "Thanks. Be careful," he added. This wasn't some botched report. It was cleaned on purpose. Someone inside had known what Prescott and Hartley saw, and they made sure it never made it past their shift. Dana's next target was Sanders. She didn't approach Calvin Sanders directly. She waited. After confirming his transfer to the ICE field office in Yuma, she watched his routine unfold across 3 days. He left work precisely at 6:10 p.m., never glanced over his shoulder, kept to the center lane, took the same exit toward a strip of older warehouses, now used mostly for storage. On the 4th night, he deviated. She followed 2 car lengths behind, into the east end of a commercial park where a tan sedan idled at the corner of a tire shop. Sanders didn't park close. He circled, checked his mirrors, then pulled in 2 spaces down. Dana pulled around to the opposite lot behind a row of faded vending machines. Out of sight through her windshield, she watched Sanders climb into the passenger seat. The driver was familiar, wide-shouldered, posture sharp, even-seated. Brewer. She angled the parabolic mic through the crack in her passenger window. The pickup range was short, but the lot was quiet. At first, only ambient fuzz, then fragments. "You told me that sector was clear. Not supposed to surface. Not after Loma. Pulling the thread now? Don't know. I didn't log it." Sanders' voice was tight, defensive. Brewer's was flat, low, almost rehearsed. Dana adjusted the dial. "If they push this, it's all going to unravel." We clean it up, just like before." She clicked off the mic, backed out, and disappeared. Down a side road, just past midnight. Sanders' SUV turned off onto a private road leading to what had once been a pumping station. Dana followed at a distance, no lights, parking a quarter-mile out and walking the rest by moonlight. From a nearby ridge, she watched as Sanders stepped out with a plastic bin clutched tight in both hands. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the old well casing, capped in concrete, but a narrow runoff pipe remained open. He slid the bin into the shaft. It caught for a moment, then dropped. He left without looking back. By 8 a.m., she was at the Yuma County Sheriff's Office, requesting assistance under a DOJ request for a cooperation clause. The deputies who accompanied her were discreet and efficient. By noon, the box was pulled from the well. The edges were scorched inside, charred remnants of personnel logs, a laminated BP shift sheets, and fragments of a patrol route hand map. The ink bled through in places, but two names stood out: Prescott R. and Hartley L., circled twice in red. Dana didn't speak. She just took the sheet and sealed it in a fresh evidence bag herself. Later that day, Dana stopped by a regional substation, looking for processing records from 1991. She was browsing the room's intake binders when a young agent knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Ma'am," he said. She turned. He stepped inside, checking over his shoulder first. "You're the one working the Prescott and Hartley file." "That's right." He pulled something from his jacket, a compact black cassette tape, the kind used in old field recorders. "This was in my locker this morning. I don't know how it got there, but I think someone wants it heard." She took it. "What's your name?" "Eli Vargas," he said. "And you didn't get that from me." She borrowed a tape deck from the station's archive room. It took 2 tries to find one that still worked. The tape clicked into place with a rattle. The audio was degraded, fluttering, uneven, but the voices came through in short bursts. Prescott's voice was unmistakable. "I'm not covering this." Pause. Static. Hartley's voice followed. "You're not hearing us. We'll file it ourselves if you won't." Another voice, low and male. "You need to think about what you're doing." Prescott again, clearer this time. "We already have the tape. Cut out." Dana ejected it slowly, slid it into a padded evidence sleeve, and wrote Prescott and Hartley's names on the label. Eli Vargas didn't ask questions when Dana handed him a map and a pair of long-range binoculars. He just checked his watch and nodded. "You want eyes on it or movement log?" "Both," Dana said. "Watch for any unmarked vehicles. No photos, no texts, just time stamps and plates." The target was a comms relay tower decommissioned in 1993, sitting outside a scrub patch north of Kim. Officially, the tower had been phased out with the system overhaul, but locals still called it Relay 9. The base of the structure had been reinforced with cinder block in the late 80s, likely to support transmission gear. Eli knew what that meant. "People say it was used for off-grid processing," he asked. Dana nodded. "And worse." He looked over the map again. "Give me a few hours." Dana met him just before dusk, keeping her Tahoe parked behind a line of mesquite. The tower's frame creaked faintly in the wind. Metal rusted through the lattice joints. No power lines fed it now. No guards, no visible surveillance. "The place has been cold for years," Eli said, "but the door has been opened recently." Sand. Shift at the threshold. Someone comes through, not regular. They entered without flashlights. The base chamber was empty except for some leftover cabling and a cracked folding table. Dust settled heavily on everything except the far corner, where an electrical panel sat loose in its hinges. Dana popped the panel open with a penlight between her teeth. Inside, tucked behind a conduit pipe, was a sealed DHS evidence pouch. It was heat-sealed and marked with a faded internal barcode. She slid it out carefully. Inside, 2 tarnished Border Patrol badges, ID tags cracked but legible. The numbers read 7,391 and 7,392, Jonah, Avery, and Maria Torres. The names hit hard. Dana didn't know Avery or Torres, but she knew their cases. Avery was reported drowned near Falcon Lake in 1990. His truck had been found stuck in the mud. Nobody ever recovered. Torres was listed as a voluntary resignation in 1989, no trace after her last shift. She ran the badge numbers through internal systems the next morning. The case summaries were 2 paragraphs long each, single-page reports filed by a field supervisor. No autopsy, no dive recovery, no incident report longer than a coffee receipt. What stood out wasn't the brevity, it was the timing. Avery and Torres had filed misconduct notices weeks before they vanished. Handwritten complaints about irregular detainments and off-route transports, same phrasing Prescott and Hartley used. Dana spread the files across her motel wall. 6 officers from 1989 to 1992, Avery, Torres, Prescott, Hartley, Paul D.S., Lucille Reiner, all listed as voluntary terminations, presumed accidents, or internal resignations. All with known patrol shifts near unmonitored grid points. All had filed disciplinary reports in the months leading up to their disappearances. Some pages were photocopied so many times the ink had blurred. Others had redacted blocks in awkward places, cutting off context mid-sentence. What wasn't there said as much as what remained. She marked a common element in red ink across each corner. No follow-up, no body, no inquiry. Brewer was speaking at a joint press event for a community outreach campaign when Dana confronted him. Dana didn't wait for the mic to pass. She moved to the side of the podium, catching his eye. He hesitated, mid-sentence, voice faltering only slightly, then continued. She waited. When he stepped off stage, she fell into step beside him. "How many more did you bury?" she asked quietly. Brewer didn't blink. "Excuse me, you know who?" "Jonah, Avery, and Maria Torres were. You know what happened at Relay 9. He stopped walking. "I don't know what you're talking about." Prescott, Hartley, D.S., Reiner. Their names are still on inactive payrolls with no retirement, no death certificates, no processing, just silence. Brewer's face didn't shift, but his voice did. Lower, flatter. "Be careful before you make serious accusations." She met his stare. "They're not accusations, they're connections." Then she walked away, leaving him watching her go, surrounded by applause he no longer seemed to hear. That night, Dana composed an encrypted message with a copy of the badge photos, the burned roster, and notes on the Relay 9 discovery. She sent it to a former DOJ colleague who'd worked internal affairs in ICE before transferring out. It wasn't formal yet, just a whisper through the right channel. By morning, she had a callback request and a vague confirmation. "Your package landed with interest. Quiet interest. Don't lose those badges." That was enough to keep moving. The message came through her burner at 3:17 p.m. The voice was male, hushed with a faint Chihuahua accent. "You're looking for the ones who vanished near Loma. Who is this? You don't need the name. Listen, Dana waited. A coyote who used to run with Mando, Zayas said to women agents, chased a transport. By mistake in 91, one of theirs. Prescott and Hartley. He said they followed a decoy route north of Sector K. They called it Low Negro, but it wasn't the cartel that got them. What do you mean? Someone else was waiting. Cartel left them alone. Said they were too close to someone as a passe privada. Dana's pen stilled. But the line disconnected. Dana was reviewing topographic overlays of the relay tower grid when the motel phone rang. She answered Reic. A man's voice came through, gravelly and low. You're the one asking about the relay site. That's right. Who's this? I used to work maintenance, contracted in 91 for tower cooling units before they shut it down. There was a pause. Then I was told to backfill a pit by the base south-facing side. Didn't ask what was in it. Who told you? Didn't leave a name, left cash. Said it was a drainage hazard. Why now? I kept quiet because I thought it was cartel. But what you're digging up, I don't think it was them. Dana sat forward. Where exactly? The slope east of the outer wall, 3 feet down under a runoff grate. It's probably shifted by now. The line disconnected. Dana called in a favor from Hud Wallace, a county forensic tech she trusted. Hud had worked burn pit excavations back in 94 and knew how to move without raising noise. They arrived at the site before sunrise. The truck was marked Site Survey, Structural Risk Assessment with a magnetic logo. Dana peeled it off the side as soon as they parked. Hud opened the rear hatch, handed her a folding spade. What are we looking for? Canvas, sealed, buried, shallow, early 90s. They started at the slope near the base of the tower. The sand was tight-packed, but visibly different, coarser, with an uneven texture where water had once pooled. At 32 inches, Dana struck something. Dense. She set the shovel down and dropped to her knees, brushing back the layers by hand. Canvas. She glanced at Hud. Mark this camera out. They worked methodically, exposing the outline of 2 large duffel bags, zippered, but intact. Dana reached into the side seam of the first and pulled it open. The air inside was stale, dry, and sour. Inside, wrapped in a deteriorated military poncho, were human remains, partially mummified. Limbs folded awkwardly to fit the space, ducked. Tape bindings still clung to the wrist bones. Dana stepped back, steadying her breath. Hud, now gloved, peeled back a layer near the torso of the second bag. Nestled in the ribcage of each was a shattered badge, partially fused from heat. Dana didn't need to read them. She already knew who they belonged to, Rachel Prescott and Laura Hartley. They bagged the remains carefully, layer by layer, preserving anything not yet eroded by time. When Hud rolled back the poncho collar of the second bag, something small tumbled out, a silver wristwatch, cracked. Hands stopped at 1916. The county lab was cold and sterile. Coroner Alicia Frey reviewed the scan results as she spoke, voice matter-of-fact, but not indifferent. To females, height and dental consistent with Prescott and Hartley. Taphonomic decay lines up with a mid-June exposure window. Dana stood, behind the glass, arms crossed, unmoving. Cause of death. Frey clicked to a cross-section of the thoracic vertebrae for both. Gunshot wounds to the spine. Entry from upper back, downward trajectory. No exit, execution style. Close range, less than 3 feet. No stippling, but consistent angle and residue pattern. Dana nodded once. Frey added, "We found partial rounds lodged in L2 of both. They're degraded, but the alloy and groove spacing match point for OS and W Border Patrol issue from the period. Anything to ID the weapons. No serials, too damaged. But I can tell you what it's not. Not cartel. Their ammo from that era was 9mm surplus. No plating. This is internal. Internal issue weapons," Dana said aloud, not to Frey, but to the silence between them. She held the watch again in her hand back at the motel. The band was worn leather. The casing was cracked from impact, but the second hand still hovered over 1916. Dana opened Prescott and Hartley's old radio log again. The last confirmed radio ping, 1842. No further contact after that. Dispatch timestamp ended at 1859, 17 minutes. That's all they had between their last location and their deaths. At midnight, Dana composed the memo in a secured session. She attached autopsy findings, ballistic comparisons, time-stamped excavation photos, and the recovered badges. She encrypted it with DOJ-grade compression and addressed it to the same contact who had greenlit her last drop. 5 days later, a response came through a private call channel. "This is R.J. Manning. You sent the Prescott and Hartley file. That's right. Task force approved. Quiet scope, oversight only. How quiet? No press. No local cooperation yet. First stage is intel sweep and Brewer." A pause. His name just landed on the red list. Dana stared at the ceiling of the motel room. Her voice didn't shift. "Then I'll keep digging." It wasn't hard to find him now. Dana waited until just after sundown, parked along the back lot of the Galan's field office where Sanders had recently been transferred. No longer cleared for field work, no badge on his chest, just a weather-faded polo and DHS ID clipped to a belt loop. When he stepped out, a carry-out bag hanging from one hand, Dana moved fast. She met him at the bumper of his car. "We need to talk." He blinked. "I'm not supposed to." She pulled a clear pouch from her coat pocket, Prescott and Hartley's cracked wristwatch, the hands frozen at 1916. Then a sealed evidence container with 2 warped bullet fragments. Then a copy of a logbook page bearing his initials. "You were the last to sign them in," Dana said. "And you're going to be the first to help me pull this thing wide open." His lips parted, but no sound came out. She saw the panic spark behind his eyes. He didn't run. That was enough. They used a side office in the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Station. No mirrors, no cameras, just a recorder, a man unraveling, and a woman who knew how to listen. Sanders sat across from Dana, sweat bleeding through his collar. "I'm not wired," she said. "You speak freely. You help me get the truth in writing, and maybe you walk out of this with your life intact." He nodded faintly. "Tell me about the tower." His first words barely came out. "They weren't scheduled for that patrol. Who rerouted them?" "Brewer," he said, eyes down. "Told dispatch they were reassigned. Only a few people knew. Dana didn't." Blink. "Why that sector?" "Because of what we were doing out there. That tower was used for unsanctioned processing. Off the books, no chain of custody. Migrants came in through a known corridor, were separated before entering the system. Who was involved? Some wore our uniforms, some wore cartel." He drank again, spilling a few drops onto the table. "They called me," he said, "after dark. Said they heard voices inside the tower. Movement. They hadn't filed a report yet. Wanted me to come take a look before they escalated it. What did they find? Cells, he whispered, built right into the concrete foundation. Just 1 or 2 people inside. Kids, mostly. No tags, no files. They said they'd been there for days. Dana kept her voice steady. They planned to report it. They said, if I wouldn't they would, and Brewer. He showed up 20 minutes later, told me to clear out. Said they didn't know what they were walking into. Sanders' hands clenched together. They were pacing outside. Their weapons were holstered, but their jaws were locked. Brewer kept telling them it was an authorized operation, that if they filed anything, the fallout would take their families down too. He paused. They said no. Turned around to get in their truck. What happened? I left, he said, hollow. Brewer stayed behind. I waited by the ridge. Minutes later, I heard 2 gunshots. They didn't check in the next day. No report, no emergency flag. Brewer filed an absence as unauthorized leave, said they quit, and you. I got a call from a secure line, told to meet him at the base of Relay 9. He had a tarp in the back. Of his unit, they were inside it, already gone. Dana didn't interrupt. She let the weight of silence stretch. You altered the logs. Yes. Changed the timestamp. Filed it 2 days late to make it look like they never checked back in. Forged 2 supervisor initials. Your idea. Brewer gave me the paper. I just did what I was told. Dana placed a file. In front of him, headshots, missing persons reports, official memos, half redacted. You recognize these names? He nodded without hesitation. Avery flagged discrepancies in intake manifests. Torres filed a misconduct notice after being ordered to delay transport to central processing. Paul DS started asking about fuel receipts. Tied to ghost vehicles. Reiner too. None of them lasted the year. Dana flipped a page. What about support roles? Sanders exhaled. Nathan Caudry, DHS, logistics. He moved supplies no one ever saw. Jacob Hanley, sheriff's deputy from Valvary. He handled highway escorts for unmarked vans. Federal. Not officially, but you'd never know from the credentials. They were planted. She circled 2 names on her list. And the cartel. He nodded. They paid us not to interfere, not to dig, not to ask questions. An hour later, she walked him. To the side exit. A black SUV waited with a federal marshal behind the wheel. No lights. No insignia. Sanders didn't ask where they were going. He climbed into the back seat, head bowed, and never looked back. Dana stood on the curb, arms crossed. The confession was real, but the machine it described was larger than any one man. This was just a crack in the dam. Something or someone darker was still behind it. Dana knew exactly who. The drive to Amarillo took 6 hours, with Dana making only 1 stop to refill her tank and check in with her DOJ contact. She didn't rehearse what she'd say. There was no script for this. Eric Prescott and Sarah Hartley answered the door with a quiet weariness. They looked like people who'd lived the last 13 years between hope and resignation. Early 50s, weather-beaten faces. They recognized the badge clipped to Dana's hip before she even said hello. You with Border Patrol? Eric asked, voice flat. No, Dana said. Used to be. Now I'm with Doge. Task force rotation. Their eyes dropped to the manila folder in her hand. You're here about Rachel and Laura, Sarah said. Dana didn't answer. She opened the folder and took out the evidence. Pouch. Inside, the silver wristwatch. Cracked face stopped at 1916. Eric and Sarah looked at it for a long time, then gave a single nod. You found them, didn't you? Dana sat with them in the small kitchen while they stared at the table. Eric exhaled through his nose. They said they ran, that they abandoned their post. My father believed it. Didn't even go to the memorial the station held. Said they'd embarrassed us. Dana waited, but they didn't run, did they? Sarah's voice cracked. They tried to do right. They did. Eric nodded again, this time slower. The tears came in silence, not from rage, but release. Dana stayed seated across from them, saying nothing, watching a weight years in the making finally slide off someone else's shoulders. We knew it, Sarah said quietly. Even back then, they would have said goodbye. Back in El Paso, Dana received a padded envelope with no return address. The postmark traced back to Loma. Inside, 5 grainy time-stamped photographs from 1991. No note. She recognized Prescott and Hartley in one of them, wearing their duty uniforms, standing near the base of the old Cums Tower. Their expressions were unreadable. Beside them stood 3 men, faces angled away from the camera. 2 wore tactical pants, no patches. One had a Border Patrol windbreaker, but the insignia was off. Dana noticed it immediately. Wrong font, wrong positioning, like it was made for appearances, not legitimacy. She ran facial recognition through internal archives. Nothing, no names, no hits. But it told her all she needed. Prescott and Hartley weren't alone. They were being watched long before they vanished. It started with a smell, acrid and creeping. Dana had just slid into her cruiser after a late call with her DOJ liaison when smoke started rising through the vents. She threw open the door, dropped to the asphalt, and watched the front end burst into flame. The fire crew arrived 7 minutes later. They didn't need long to figure out it wasn't electrical. An accelerant had been poured beneath the steering column, likely through the air intake grill. Ignition timed or remote triggered. Arson. Back at the station, the response was subdued. You're making enemies, said the acting captain, a man named Milt Connors. Big ones. We've had feds come through before, but nobody's ever pulled. Threads like you. She didn't reply. She just signed the incident report and requested a replacement vehicle. Dana drove to the outskirts of Sierra Blanca and parked near the truckway station. Cell reception was patchy, but her DOJ contact picked up on the second ring. She didn't ease into it. They burned my unit. I'm compromised. Understood, the voice on the other end said. We've been expecting pushback. I need authorization. For tactical support, Brewer's people aren't covering their tracks anymore. A pause. You'll get 1 team, 4 agents, 2 vehicles, no press, no paper trail. You get 1 chance to make this stick. That's all I need. The call ended, without pleasantries. She stared out at the desert for a long time, then picked up the motel landline and dialed another number. Sanders, yeah. His voice was groggy, like he hadn't slept in days. You told me they met off-grid sometimes. You remember where? There was a pause on the other end. Not hesitation, calculation. Staging shack, old border, utility outpost. Mile marker 218, just past Red Cut Wash. It's been abandoned since '92, but Brewer always liked using places with dirt floors. Easier to clean, you're sure? I'm sure. Dana jotted the coordinates and stared at them for a long beat. There was no walking this back. The old staging shack at mile marker 218 hadn't seen traffic in years, once used to stock bottled water and first aid kits for patrol units. Now it was a rusting shell, surrounded by sand, mesquite, and memory. No cell reception, no cameras, no lights for miles. Perfect for people who didn't want to be seen. Dana arrived first with Deputy U.S. Marshal Rob Tieran. Lean, mid-40s, minimal words, but solid. They were joined by two tactical agents from the DOJ team, Agent Wolf and Agent Monroe. They kept the perimeter wide, running silent comms through analog earpieces, not trusting digital lines. Everyone had studied the approach routes. There'd be no second chances. Inside her SUV, Dana clutched the burner phone Sanders had used to bait Brewer into the meet. The message was simple. Old papers need moving before the audit. Usual place, no delays. Brewer confirmed within 20 minutes. 1 hour later, his reply pinged the relay. 218 it is. One extra joining. Keep it clean. She looked at the time. 2144. ETA 10. Tieran muttered beside her. He checked his sidearm, then nodded toward the field scope mounted on a tripod. Lights, West End. They all went quiet. At 2154, a dust-covered SUV pulled up just shy of the shack's shadow line. A late-model Chevy Tahoe outstepped Superintendent Len Brewer, tan slacks, black windbreaker. Ball cap pulled low. He walked slowly, scanning the perimeter before heading toward the shack. 2 minutes later, a second vehicle rolled up. This one older, unmarked, desert-worn, tags covered in dust. A man stepped out wearing jeans and a lightweight jacket. He carried a military-style duffel over one shoulder. Dana zoomed the scope. The man was mid-50s, stocky, with close-cut hair. No identifying patches, no badge. Unidentified male is courier. She said into the mic. Proceeding to meeting. The two met near the shack's edge, voices low. Monroe, posted behind a ridge with a directional mic, whispered, getting fragments. Audit's not clean. Move what's left. Shred list before rotation. Then, did you burn the cruiser? Brewer's voice, clear. I did what had to be done, the other man replied. There was a pause. Call it, Dana said. Tieran moved first, flanking. Wide, raising his service weapon. U.S. Marshals, don't move. From the other side, Wolf and Monroe swept in, rifles drawn, angles locked. Dana emerged from her SUV and approached fast. Brewer froze, but the courier ran, tossing the duffel, and cutting through a ditch toward the far slope. Runner, Wolf barked. North edge, Tieran gave chase. The courier made it 40 yards before a tackle brought him down hard. Sand kicked up. Dana heard the metallic click of cuffs locking. Back by the shack, Brewer stood perfectly still, hands raised. He didn't look surprised. Dana stepped in, weapon drawn but lowered. Len Brewer, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and the murders of agents Rachel Prescott and Laura Hartley. He didn't argue, just said, you made it further than most. You left a trail. You don't know the half of it. That's what court's for. He smirked once, then turned around, wrists presented, and let them cuff him. Inside the duffel were printed ledgers. Handwritten intake logs dated between 1989 and 1992. One listed names. Most had no assigned case numbers. Beside, some were faint red X's. There were other items. A VHS tape labeled relay footage, the 11th of May, 91. A half-melted badge, 2 rolls of undeveloped film, and several slips of paper with cash drop amounts, dated and initial. One of the initials matched Brewer's handwriting from old logs. It was enough to break open the full case. The DOJ moved fast. Charges filed within 48 hours. Brewer was held without bail in a federal detention facility in Laredo. His attorneys filed for delay, citing health concerns. Denied. Sanders was moved to a safe facility and entered into a sealed plea deal. His testimony led to 2 more arrests, 1 former DHS contractor, 1 sheriff's deputy. Both caught tampering with internal migration records from the early 90s at trial. Brewer maintained his innocence, claimed Prescott and Hartley overreacted. 2 operations meant to contain the situation in a dangerous era, but the jury didn't buy it. The confession, physical evidence, and recovered remains made it airtight. He was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to obstruct justice, falsification of government records, and second-degree murder of 2 federal officers. Sentencing: life without parole. Sanders got 30 years. Eligible for parole in 20. It was a Tuesday in February. The wind was light, sky clear, the ground dry and hard. The burial took place in a private plot north of Amarillo, modest, shaded by mesquites. No press, no color guard. Their siblings, Eric and Sarah, stood with one hand each on the coffins. They didn't speak. They didn't cry. Dana remained off to the side. She stayed through the burial, through the final prayer, through the silent dispersal that followed. When Eric and Sarah turned to go, they stopped at her shoulder. "You did right by them," Eric said. Dana gave a single nod. They deserved justice. Then she watched them walk back to their truck and drive away without looking back. On a warm spring morning, Dana packed the last box from her assigned DOJ quarters. Her rotation was up. The investigation was over. She left her badge behind. She drove out of El Paso in silence, windows half down, wind threading through the cabin. The desert rolled beside her like an old scar, somewhere past mile marker 224. A fresh green and white Border Patrol unit crested the opposite hill. Dana caught it in her periphery. A young woman behind the wheel, 22 maybe, straight-backed, alert. The radio buzzed softly at her shoulder. As they passed each other, the agent nodded. Dana returned the gesture without slowing and thought to herself, "They buried them in the desert and buried the truth with them. But the earth doesn't forget, and neither do the people who refuse to let corruption win." Rachel Prescott and Laura Hartley died doing their job the right way. Not to make headlines, not for a pension, but because silence was never an option for them. Their legacy lives on in every agent who chooses duty over comfort, truth over convenience, and the law over the men who think they can bend it. That's the job if you still believe in it. Thanks for staying until the end. If this story gripped you, like, share, and subscribe. Justice Unraveled for more stories, justice, crime, and mysteries that refuse to stay buried.